Hi,
Hey, how are you?
good, good.
Hi.
Hey, hey, Yakov, how's it going? Um, I know that Benji reached out to me that he's not gonna be able to make it today. Um, we'll just give it one more minute to see if anyone else shows up. Do you know if Hugh is still going to be joining these?
Not sure actually.
Okay.
I'll ping him, see he wants to join on it.
Hey, Yvonne.
Hey.
All right, should we get started? Okay, so I think the last meeting was 2 weeks ago. We were talking through a few different ideas of how to address the concerns that Matt had. I reached out to him, but I haven't heard back from him. I'll reach out again to see if he had any thoughts on the things that we proposed. If I don't hear it back, maybe we should just talk about it in the next working group meeting. The main GraphQL one. Yeah, I know, and I know also that Yakov, like, he has his proposal too that he's been iterating on. And he's also been working very hard on both a spec draft and a GraphQL JS implementation. And we met last week. He started to show me through the PRs. Yeah, maybe we should talk about that with the group that's here. So Yakov, he has a bunch of stacked PRs, and I think the top one in the stack is for GraphQL JS is to build this concept of a publisher that manages like how the payloads get added to the queue and released, and handles the details of the underlying async generator. And the spec draft that he wrote also includes that same publisher. And I guess maybe I don't know if Yvonne, you had a chance to look at it at all, but maybe it would be good to get your thoughts on how that's implemented.
Can you, I'm not sure I will have time for detailed review, but if you can say like a PR number,
Yeah,
I will like quickly look if like I understand general idea. Which one it is?
1 second, let me. Yeah, it's 3894. I'll put it in the
94.
chat here. Yeah, so this one actually keeps the same implementation that's on main right now, but builds out the publisher, and then that's used as a base for the changes that go into our like the draft that we put into that we've been sharing in the gist. So that this is kind of like the first step there. Yeah, I guess like what's on main now, kind of. Yeah, do you want to describe it, Yakov, or?
Yeah, just a general question that maybe like as far as I see, because I assumed you remember you wanted to use some other concepts than async generator, some other like primitive. I forget how it was. So I thought you doing that, but no. What I see is you just basically like get code from execute and wrap it in a class. Is it correct? Or like, is there any structural changes on how things done?
So taking a step back, taking a step back, I mean, what we have is a stream that is published. So what we already have now on main already has in some sense the concept of a publisher, meaning, and there's pretty much the same kind of cycle. You know, we wait for some asynchronous event to happen, like a promise to be fulfilled, and then we cycle through you know, some sort of intermediate state. So on main right now, that's the entire list of promises. So every time any one of those promises is fulfilled that represent any of the branches of deferred results, we cycle through all of them again and check which of them have completed, and then we build a payload for that. So that already is a bunch of publishing logic. So what I do here is I extract that publishing logic into a class, and I change it, you know, enhance it a little bit so that it basically has two improvements. The first improvement is that we don't you know, we don't have to check all of the promises to see if they've completed. Instead, we can keep a separate list of completed promises, and whenever any of them have completed, we just check that set, so that we don't have to cycle through maybe, I don't know, 1,000 pending stream items to see which one has completed. So that's one improvement. And the rest, and the second improvement is that we make this synchronous, so that when the initial result is completed, it already will know, like without waiting any extra ticks, it already will know if filtering has like excluded all of the all of the deferred results. So those are the basic two improvements. But the idea is that we already have a publisher set up, and so I extract it and I tweak it, you know, some bug fixes, but no output is changed. No, meaning no really new construct, just a different way of awaiting changes and storing the parent hierarchy. So I think the construct that I think in a while back in a couple old PRs involved like a repeater, which is a very, very clever implementation of like an async generator. This does not do that. This does not do anything new like that. It's basically just taking the logic that we have, using the primitives we have, and formalizing it a little bit, just tweaking a little bit better so that it's a very strong base for when things get a little crazy with concurrent delivery of fields of deferred fragments.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Why something changed in tests? Like obviously imports changed, but like why snapshots changed? I'm looking deferred test and like, for example, empty has next appear, like very strange object just with has next false. And yeah. You unmute. Oh, something with mine.
Yeah, so that has to do with the timing. I'm trying to get that up just on my phone.
Maybe you know what
Yeah.
would will help.
Yeah, I think you were telling me
helpful.
about that case.
Yeah.
It's something like there's an extra tick that we have somewhere in the existing implementation that's not necessary. That means that we don't know that when there's an error, that we don't know that there's no more payloads when there's an error because there's an extra tick somewhere, like the check where we're checking for it was something like that. So these cases are, there's an error in the initial payload and there shouldn't be anything coming out, but because of that extra tick, we don't know that all of the payloads actually aren't valid anymore because of that error.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in some of the tests, the extra tick, shortening the number, reducing the number of ticks causes us to omit an has next true and then an extra has next false because we've omitted, let's say, before we know that an async iterator has completed. Whereas if we were slower, there wouldn't be an extra payload. And in some of the tests, it's the reverse. We can know immediately when the initial result has completed whether there are any pending results. And so we can reduce an extra has next, empty has next false. The other changes in the test files are because this is just built on an earlier PR that separates all of this logic into a separate file. And so if we merge that one first, then some of the diff gets smaller.
Yeah, so just to understand, like with new has next, like new objects with has next false, caused by event loop thing, like we have like one thing. I maybe like I'm actually like not very familiar with different stream implementation. It's evolved so much that last time I actually reviewed, but it's like pure from logical standpoint of view. It's like when you have has next object with has next false and no errors, it's like weird why you have it. Like if it had some errors, yeah, I understand errors happened and you say like stuff closed. Stream also I can kind of understand, like yeah, in case of stream we can have like empty has next, right? Object with just has next. Okay, so it's not something new. Okay, we will have it in spec. Okay. One thing
we should only have it now with this change. Actually, we should only have it now with stream. That should be the only case where it shows up like an empty has next. No, never with defer.
Yeah, quick feedback, and I will.
That was already the case before. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can
Sorry.
document it in more, but like small things. Publisher is like pretty generic name. Maybe like incremental result publisher, or like something more like specific. Because technically we can have other publishers, and we cannot file name publisher and class name publisher. You cannot guess what it's actually published. And specifically, it's not like, for example, you can assume it's subscription, and as I understand, it's not related to subscription, at least for now. Yeah, and it would be great, there is a knowledge shared between you and Rob, and you discuss, and now you explain to me, but it's like it's saved somewhere in the video, but not in code. So maybe I suggest like moving all the functions, because Lee teach me like a good lesson. If a file called publisher, class publisher should be on top and should have like comment saying what it's supposed to do, why we have this thing. I will leave like with generic feedback there. Like, so I'm more concerned about like documenting it and making it obvious what this class is used for. But in general, I think it's great. Yeah. So if it's separated, because previously execute was like big, and it was hard to follow all the like functions, especially if you read it from top to bottom. Now it's like what a big logical chunk of it went away. Yeah, after this call, I will, not after this call, probably tomorrow, I will leave like small comments about like moving stuff around, and maybe like better names, less generic names than publisher. But in general, I think it's like definitely a good start of like yeah. And so the end result of this, what's the end result of this PR stack? The end result is what you presented on the last working group, or it's like something different?
The end result of the stack should be matching the gist that Rob put out a while back, except that I haven't implemented either the subpaths or the IDs for the payload. So I just always use the full path. But currently the goal is to match the gist. And there's a little bit of that's the end result of the whole stack. Meaning, so it includes, incremental delivery with deduplication of execution and delivery.
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can match up until we change response format, and when like try to get Meta involved and like figure out like where we're heading, and when start merging styles that change response. So like I think it would be great to merge everything up until we change response format. And maybe like what you presented in yeah, it's like yeah, it's stage 1, so we need to discuss it more. We cannot merge it. Oh yeah, oh, your plan is to merge it like with response change.
Yeah, the thing is, we can't, currently as implemented, we can't actually get the exact same old response format. Just we can't, we have a deduplicated version. And so let's say a parent field has, so every defer is going to have a parent, let's say maybe the initial response or maybe some other defer. And if the parent has a couple fields that the child doesn't, like the initial result has, let's say requests a user and requests the ID and the name, and the defer doesn't request the ID or name, just some other like complicated slow field. In the dedupe, but it also requests the ID and the name. So in our deduplicated version, we'll only send the slow field. But to reconstruct the non-deduplicated version, you would have to then sort of figure out which fields were not on the parents. Like we have the initial in our deduplicated version, we have the initial result and then we have the additional fields. But I don't think we necessarily, I have to think, it's actually a little complicated to reconstruct just what the child defer has, meaning sort of undeduplicated. It actually would make it much more complex.
Like, just to clarify, because we have two types of maybe more, but I'm thinking about two types in this thing: deduplication with initial response, deduplication between competing defers. So I think it's pretty safe to like change the format of deduplicated with initial response. I think it's pretty safe. We discussed it a long time. We'll agree it's happening. So I'm like, I think it's safer because it's obvious how to do that. And also, as far as I understand, it's like simpler for clients. But deduplication between competing defers, it's like, it's what we basically discussing now. So when you say it's hard to do it without deduplication, do you mean like one of them?
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly the case, because like the gist that we have now, the one that I demoed at that working group meeting, I guess it was a month ago now. That one was like full deduplication in every aspect, like between it's like every field is only said once. And I thought that there was like agreement on that direction, but Matt's concerns were just around like more of the metadata, like how we're like saying the paths and what's pending and whatnot, that stuff.
Okay. I assume like it was because we need to look into incremental in every item of incremental and look like, is it belong to paths that we
Well, it is, but that's because of the full deduplication, right? It's like how it maybe. Yeah, maybe that was my understanding.
Yeah, okay. Like, good thing, Jakob.
I don't think anyone was proposing that we bring
Mm-hmm.
duplication back at this point, right?
Before we went too deep into competing purpose, like with PR stack, before do you have only one PR before you change the response, or like multiple? Do we have something to work on?
Yeah, not really. So basically the first PR in the stack just moves the code into a separate file, and the second introduces the new publisher with those, as a separate, class and with those bug fixes. The third PR stack adds tests, which just adds a whole bunch of tests which show that things are duplicated. And then so that, the next PR, which is the main one, adds deduplication. And instead of, that PR now shows how those existing tests change rather than just introducing a bunch of new tests. And then the next PR adds the pending notifications. And then the last one is sort of like optional. I think it's, to discuss, consolidate some of the payloads so that we're not sending so that we reduce the number basically. So sometimes meaning in when we first add pending and when we first introduce the new deduplicated publisher, we always will have a pending for every completed, and then we'll wait another round before completing it. And with the final one, we skip some pendings, and we, if they're already completed. So that's the basic order. The main big PR is the one that does most of the work, is the one that adds completed and separates out the incremental data from the completed payloads. And it's really tough to break that apart into smaller ones, just because it's a big change in terms of how everything hooks together. We had an initial PR implementation that I worked on way back then that did deduplication differently and partly, but I don't think it would be really helpful to go back to that and merge it, and then you can see how the other response. I think that would just confuse the Git history even more, so that I'm not quite sure how to break up the main PR in the stack into smaller ones, unfortunately.
Yeah, so basically we have like 3 PRs. Like, can we do, can we like, by the way, Rob, when you say like, Matt doesn't responding, he didn't respond, or he said like he don't have a time to join. Because
I just didn't. I messaged him on Discord, and I just haven't got.
Yeah,
haven't heard back.
I can maybe solve that because like Discord is weird. I personally also don't respond on Discord a lot of time because like it's not working for me, like really weird one. So trick to reach Matt is to use Facebook, which is weird because Facebook is social network. Yeah, but as I understand, they use Facebook inside Facebook for messaging. So he's always on. In my experience, he responds like immediately on Facebook. I will reach to him and pin him to check Discord. And like maybe you can agree, like maybe he will add you as a friend on Facebook or something, so you can communicate faster. And can we do like we merge with 3 PRs that don't change anything, and it's good chunk of work like for a week to review and merge it, and ask Matt if he can join like Monday, and if he cannot, because I have like concern of confusing thing. Like one thing is to release some format. We release some format. People already adopted it. We decided to change it. And I'm kind of worried that we will release intermediate format. Like it will be, especially intermediate formats that like look like is very similar to finish one, but changing the details. And if we stuck on a long time in like half finished state, it will also be weird. So I'm like more, since Matt has the strongest like concerns in the group, maybe it's worth to discuss with him and see like, do we his argument and decide, do we need to like change it? It's like, is it minor improvements, adding like some metadata? Is it like big improvements? Is it valid concern? Is it not that big concern? What do you think about basically do we change, do we do incremental change to response format, or we will try to find a response format that satisfied like final one and apply it as a final thing? What's
Yeah, and that's definitely fair. I don't think that we're gonna be able to have everything that Yakov did already like merged in like the next week or two. So that's why I was thinking that we could just start with this one small PR for the publisher and get thoughts, and
definitely.
while we're still figuring it out with Matt and everyone else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like let's try to merge everything that don't change, like first 3 pairs, and hopefully it will be like pretty fast. Rob, I trust you as a main reviewer, and if I will have time, I will like leave general comments. If it's something big, like a new class, ping me. If it's something like smaller, like changing the tests,
Yeah.
you more in scope of code. So like just review. Maybe ask like Benji to review, like at least have like a couple of reviewers and just match it.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been doing that. There's been like a few small PRs that Yakov extracted, like small refactors, and I approved those, and either you or someone else from the reviewer team approved it, and those were merged. I just wanted to call this one out because it's a new class. It's like it's a bigger change. I think that I'll review the test. I think that I agree with them, like the changes that showed up in the tests, and I'll approve it.
One thing, please document it there, because it's like if it's raised a question, it's the raised question for you, Rob, and Yakov explain it. It's the raised question for me, and Yakov explain
definitely.
it. Let's make it in GitHub history, so it will explain it for everybody why this test changed.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but the other part is with this publisher class, like I'm curious how are we going to have it relate to what goes in the spec. So I think that we have like a spec PR that has like a pretty faithful representation of this publisher. I know that Benji had concerns about having like any kind of mutable state in the spec where there's a function that modifies a variable that wasn't created. And I do think there is a little bit of that, like by the nature of how the publisher works. It is all kind of wrapped up into like this group of functions that only do publisher stuff. And then the executor calls those functions, and that's where the state is managed. So I asked Benji for his opinion on that. I think he was out for the past few days, and I think so. Well, I'll get his thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I'm like less concerned. I'm less concerned since it's not the end of the thing. So like, I think if we have like response format problem, how client will consume like the first problem, and how to document it in a spec. Out of these like problems, how to document it in a spec, it's like smallest problem. And I'm like think it's like polishing step. So best case scenario, figure out how to describe it in a text that like in similar fashion that all the other algorithms. In like worst case scenario, it will be text explanation as similar how we describe streams in Subscribe. We also don't describe streams as like functions. We describe it as a text. So like worst case scenario, I like algorithms. I like functions. I think everybody feels the same. That's why we're programmers. But in worst case scenario, we can describe it in the text. I don't think it's a big problem now. And I definitely don't think describing, like, I don't think we should change the whole proposal because we cannot describe it as like pure functions. I think like, yeah, and bit of trivia. When I spoke with Lee about GraphQL.js, he actually said like he first wrote like stuff in GraphQL.js and write test against it, and only when he described it in the spec. So I think now we kind of in discovery phase. So I wouldn't bother with spec algorithms, at least
All
for
right.
now.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So we describe them. We discuss like with pairs. Anything else we want to discuss?
I don't think so. Yeah, if you can reach out to Matt and see if he can check his Discord and reach out to me, and then figure out some way that we can communicate that's easier for him, that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Just one thing is that in terms of the changes like that are in the comments on that gist, in terms of the response format, I see them as addressing two related but distinct issues. I mean, the first is the immutable concern, meaning right now in our current algorithm, we have what Benji's been called, what we've been calling the final reconcilable object that's updated, whereas and that object is immutable, I guess by design, and some of it's just suggestions of changes like in the comments that Matt and we all have been making have tried to produce an algorithm that can avoid those mutable objects. But the second issue, which is kind of related, is how we present the location of the pending fragments and the location of the insertions to either the final reconcilable object or even in these new proposals to the new immutable objects. Meaning, do we send lists or do we send trees? And the idea would be that trees might be tree-like structures. It might be easier for the client to navigate either that final reconcilable object or just in reconstructing immutable objects. So those are two different concerns. How they fit together, they may interact with each other, but they're two different concerns. So I just want to, not really adding much to it, but I just want to highlight that those are two different issues, meaning even if we we don't go with Matt's suggestions, we stick with, the single final reconcilable object, we still might want to send trees or tree-like structures down using either the special characters or the arrays or the doubly wrapped, like Benji said, the doubly wrapped kind of trees. But those are two different issues. So we might want to, I don't know, maybe we want to deal with Matt's issue first about immutability and then the trees second. I think we've sort of been dealing with them both together, but they're not exactly tied hand in hand.
Yeah, on that note, maybe I can show what I'm working on. Yeah, because I tried last time I suggested a syntax solution, and I was thinking about that a lot. I wanted to present something before we go, but so basically I took like Matt's idea of alias fragments, and one of his suggestions was use @ symbol as a reference. So now I will explain how it's connected to differs in a second. So basically, you provide a query, you use like alias fragments, and here you have like you have fields that CNC is same, and you have different fields. And inside the data, you have like IDs, and IDs, and inside like references, you have the same IDs, and it's not JSON. I solve this problem of arbitrary data in JSON by having a path. So when you follow a reference, you need to compare a path. So because it's like it's reference inside the root field, so you go there, you follow the reference, and if a path is the same as here, when it's valid. If it's different, it's invalid. What's interesting, if we treat fields inside default fragments as promises, each field as a promises, we can use the same like ID in not promises. Basically, like C is in query, like both alias fragment have duplicating like C field, and here we just use ID from the same reference object, and I didn't figure out how to call this, like this type maybe field or something. And yeah, it's have a data. So basically, the duplication, if we switch the duplication to fields, it's pretty easy to do, because like fields can reference the same ID. And actually, like interesting thing, I figured out how to prevent infinite loops. So you follow numbers, and numbers should always grow. If numbers, if like you go into like free, and inside the free, inside the data, there is like alias fragment, and it's have like ID of less than 3, it's invalid. So you should always follow bigger numbers. That prevents like infinite loops. It's very early. It's like I figure out some of this thing today. So just wanted to share what I'm and how it's connected to how it's connected to stream and defer. Imagine we add like we add defer here and here. So A and B already presented in response. So we basically, say like we say is alias for basically took this path and add like to a name. And C3 we can deliver in a separate payload. Basically, we can add like another payload, specify has next true, and we can add another payload. Inside with another payload, we can have references, and references can have like with number 3 in it, with the data. So basically, sorry, I lost it. So like 3 and 3 finish. So if it's if stuff resolved synchronously, it's in the same pivot. If it's resolved asynchronously, it's in a separate pivot. So in type like a field or something, field. Yeah, I'm still like thinking about it, but maybe I will document something. It's half finished. It's still like have problems, edge cases with like deep matching. I still figure out how to do deep matching. One thing is interesting for me is if we switch alias fragments have the same problem of deduplication. We discuss it. We kind of agree it's like a great thing to do component isolation, but the main concern for alias fragments was that the data is duplicating. And with defer, we have the same problem. So my idea is, what if we use, if two proposals have like the same problem, maybe we'll use one to solve another. So like we use deferred, we used alias fragments to solve deferred problem and allow developers to defer only alias fragments. It's like I'm trying to see how far I can go with it and actually do what you said, Yakov, to do like tree like structure when you follow IDs.
That's a really a really very interesting proposal. But before I say anything generally, I just have a question, because I don't know if I understand everything about alias fragments, but one issue with alias fragments is that you can pass down different variables, right? So you may pass down, I mean, that's the idea of sort of parameterizing fragments.
There is two things. You can have, there is like parameterizing, which is separate problem. You can do parameterize, you can add like arguments to fragments, not alias fragments. So like there is two problem of fragment isolation. Arguments and clashes emergent fields. Alias fragments doesn't solve arguments. It's so like question fields. And arguments is like another problem which might actually propose to solve like without alias fragments. So arguments don't relate to defer in any shape of form, but clashes of output fields, it's like similar to defer, and actually very interesting.
Well, so this was sort of my flow in terms of understanding. Meaning, we want to have fragment isolation, and so we want to be able to pass arguments to fragments, but because those arguments might clash, we might need to alias them. So the only reason why I bring up arguments is because once you allow the parameterizing of fragments, and I think that's going to be a major use case of alias fragments. I'm not sure how easy it is to deduplicate between the different fragments depending on how they've been parameterized, because they have to be the same really in order to, in every way, in order to say that we can safely deduplicate them. That's the, I mean, I know that might be a minor concern, but that's just the first thing that pops into my head. I think way back when I submitted an issue, well, why don't we just make every, also required aliases on, I'm not sure exactly what I was thinking at the time, but Now that I think why don't I think I also suggested we should only allow defer and stream on alias fragments. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not so sure that would work. I think I'm going to comment there that we've definitely found a better solution in the meantime.
Okay, just want to see, like, I like this idea of referencing stuff from a data itself. So when
yeah, there's a different idea that I think that I've been in the back of my head sort of working on, that I want to formalize more, but it's somewhat related, which is that if we had a way of expressing identity, and I think this comes up with the new response format that Matt was suggesting to go along with fragment isolation. Meaning, if we had a way of pointing out that that an object was the same across many different places that was referenced in the graph, whether it was in a named fragment or not, then we could, if it was really the same, then we could deduplicate it in the final response format, and that shares some, I think a lot of similarities. But it's like a separate piece, a piece that's linked and that he put together. So I wonder if you add sort of that requirement to what you're saying, then I think it would work nicely.
Like you mentioned that output format he designed, right? The one, not JSON, but new one. That one, or
yeah. I think what within that, so you're sort of like pointing to a way of putting that format into JSON, which is promising. But I think you have that piece about sort of identity of objects. Maybe.
I figure out, like, YAML have references. In YAML, it's like a native concept. Like, what if and you cannot add references in JSON. It's impossible because, like, everything without new syntax, it's not happening in JSON. But we operate on restricted JSON. So we can basically say, like, fields that start with ampersand, field names are references. You jump to a reference and you compare a path. That way you ensure, like, it's not arbitrary data. So you don't need to do escaping. So yeah, you're right. I'm actually try to do, and you find it, right? With new format. Yeah, I actually tried to find it and I could not. So thank you for finding it for me. Because yeah, you're right. I'm trying to do that, but in JSON, and keep backward compatible and least surprising. So only fields that have, like, ampersand, and fields have ampersand only because user did the alias in his query. So it's not like any field is a reference. It's not like we totally change response format. It's like when you use alias fragments, you switch to, like, you switch that thing into, like, reference mode. So it's more like try to be compatible and build a top and opt-in version of what Matt proposed here. You're on mute.
It's very it's a very promising idea. I think I guess in the context of this working group, the goal is to get defer and stream going, released. So
So the
idea would be to to try to. I think Rob, when I put out that PR, I think Rob said, "Oh no, we've delayed." You know, by that suggestion, tying them together, we're going to delay incremental delivery by a year. So I don't know exactly what date. I have to check what date Rob said that and see if it's a year has actually gone by. But I don't think it was all my fault from that suggestion.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I just like my idea is not to work with process, but until we get met response, see like how far I can go.
I think that's great.
And another thing, I'm like before we close, actually thinking a lot of what Matt said. He said like we focused on server side, how to push all necessary data in response. So we add like more stuff, and like all the data is there, but they like, so technically you can reconstruct whatever you want, more or less, and we try to keep all the semantics and even have discussion how to better preserve error semantics. So we try to push as much semantics in response as possible, but the question here is like, is it readable when person try to understand what's happening? And second thing, if it's like, is it maybe it's too complex for a client in current form? So yeah, I'm thinking of like we more or less know what data should we put inside. Like we need to deduplicate, we need to say something is pending, but can we represent it in simple layer form? So
Yeah, looking forward to see where you go with that. It's an interesting idea.
yeah, I will try to. I cannot like create the whole proposal. I will do a draft proposal, like draft proposal, meaning it's not a proposal. It's like just set of syntax ideas, and we'll post it probably on as discussion on a repo, right? The best way to have discussion for something is a repo discussions. Okay, I will post it there this week.
All right, awesome. I have to jump off now. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you all next Monday.
Yeah,
All right.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.